Okay, good morning, everyone. First, I would like to congratulate everyone who contributed to this symposium to take place, okay? In special, I would also to thank Professor Marionice and Mariana, okay, from the philosophy course of Marília, for the opportunity they gave me to participate in this work, okay? How I said, my name is Everaldo, and I am a doctor in philosophy of law by the Faculty of Law of the University of São Paulo. And I would like to say it's very nice to be with you here in this Congress this morning. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Everaldo. We will talk a little bit about this possibility of applied serendipity in the context of law and big data. So the objective of our talk is to discuss positive and negative aspects of serendipity in law. And here, serendipity is understood as a correct abduction of a surprising observation. The questions that will guide this presentation are: what can be the corrective role that new unforeseen evidence can take to rectify judicial errors in the context of ICT and big data? And how can abductive models be appropriately used in legal inquiries? And to answer the first question, we propose to discuss the concept of evidence in law and whether big data analysis techniques can contribute to provide new, unforeseen, unpredictable evidence to correct any factual, procedural, or deliberative errors. And to answer the second question, we will present and discuss a model currently used in Brazil for the application of abductive reasoning in forensic investigation. So the outline of the talk is the first part, reaching new evidence in the context of ICT and big data. The second part, we will present an abductive model frequently used in Brazil, not always, fortunately, and then our final comments. So the concept of evidence in law is more restricted than in science. According to the rules of evidence of United States, the federal rules of evidence, the law has precise laws of evidence that govern what is admissible and what it is not. So a legal definition of evidence is that evidence covers the burden of proof, admissibility, so the problem of the fruit of a poisonous tree doctrine when proofs are not admissible in law, relevance, weight, and sufficiency of what should be admitted into the record of a legal proceeding to indicate beyond reasonable doubt the perpetrator or perpetrators and attribute legal responsibility. So there are four general types of evidence according to the federal rules of evidence: real evidence related to tangible things, demonstrative evidence, models of what likely happened of a given time and place, documentary evidence, letters, blogs, other legal documents, and testimonial evidence.
Mariana,
yes?
I would like to say, Mariana, that in this context of ICT and big data, the concept of evidence has been expanded.
Yes.
And since the Lava Jato operation in Brazil. And in some cases has become a negative aspect to the dirty process of law. It was very negative to the dirty process of law.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, yes, it's true. Thank you, Everaldo. A lot of presenters already characterized the big data analytics. And as Maria and Eunice mentioned on Monday, these computational techniques are characterized with the V's: volume, velocity, veracity, variety, and value in a specific, not moral sense. And the usage of these techniques includes data mining, and it's not easy to find new correlations with data storage, data analytics, sharing, and visualization or representation of the data. So, as we presented, the second type of evidence includes models, demonstrative models. And according to Cathy O'Neill in this beautiful book, Weapons of Math Destruction, there are at least 3 different types of models. The informal ones, the ones we produce and use in our everyday activities. The models she calls healthy models that are transparent and continuously updated and revised, with both the assumptions and the conclusions clear for all to see. And these models are fed on statistics, not from proxies, and people being modeled understand the process and share the model's objective. These are healthy models, nice models. We will present an example. And the last type is destructive models that are called Weapons of Math Destruction by Cathy O'Neill. And by design, they are inscrutable, like black boxes, characterized by its opacity, scale, and capability of produce social damage. And as Maria on Monday showed us this problem of epistemic opacity. Okay, so the type 2 models are presented in this beautiful reference manual of scientific evidence of United States government, and they present this example using regressive models to trying to demonstrate that there are discrimination, gender discrimination in wages. So the plaintiff argues that the company pays male employees more than female employees. The company said that they pay more because men are better educated and have more experience. The plaintiff presents a statistical analysis with regression equations. Maybe Mariana and our friend Ettore will explain this for us in details later. But the question is that some variables are considered And in the model shows that even adjusting the difference in education and experience, women earn less wages than men. So the company, in turn, argues that the difference could be the result of chance, but the plaintiff finally replies that the coefficient for gender in the model is statistically significant, then chance is not a good explanation. This is a beautiful example of healthy modeling. And examples of models of the third type are presented by Kathy O'Neill. For example, the assessing risk of recidivism models, largely used in the first decade of the century in United States, that instead of providing more objective deliberations, less biased deliberations, these algorithms automatically assess a specific person risk of recidivism in asking for parole kind of benefits, just based on predetermined opaque parameters. This is terrible. These other very damaged models of facial recognition, and in
Mariana,
almost every.
Mariana,
Okay. Yes.
You know, facial recognition models, you know, in Brazil, it's very common to find a facial recognition album on alleged criminals in police station. We go in police station, 73% of these alleged criminals are blacks and browns. It's incredible. There is a lot of problems, discrimination in this point, you know. It's terrible.
Yes, and these mistakes, these false matches, mainly concerned African-American and African-Brazilian people. So it's really, really damaging. Yeah. So to sum up, in law, big data models of type 2, for example, can help review discriminatory practices whose volume and variety, in addition to their possible social, ethical, and political consequences, are not evident to human observers. The survey and analysis of a large volume of data on the participation of ethnic minorities in leadership positions in the most varied activities, cultural, academic, productive activities, can bring new evidence on discriminatory practices incorporated into collective generalized social habits. So such evidence can guide inclusive public policies and affirmative actions that might prevent or at least diminish such discriminatory social practices. However, according to O'Neill, big data models of the type 3 are typically promoters of unequal treatment and reinforce bad feedback processes that amplify their reach and their power to actively interfere in social interactions. And what about abductive models that interest us here? Remembering that models are considered demonstrative evidence, not real evidence. So, you know, I'm very familiar with the Persian conception of abduction in scientific inquiry. when we face an anomaly, and this little fish is not Republican, is socialist. She's red, but she's socialist. In this Persian conception of abduction, a surprising fact is observed, but if an explanatory hypothesis were true, the surprising fact would be a matter of course. Hence, there is reason to suspect that A is true. This is the formal presentation of abductive reason. However, in Brazil, the last few years, and is largely using by the people responsible for criminal investigation and abductive, so-called abductive method of forensic investigation that has the following structure. Faced with an anomalous fact, hypotheses are constructed, allowing the explanation or the proposition of theories or general law that explains the anomalous fact. And they propose there are three phases. The first one, when faced with a surprising situation, indicating the occurrence of a crime, the investigator formulates an explanatory hypothesis. The second phase, the investigator starts to examine his hypothesis, her hypothesis, to derive experimental consequence. And the third phase, the investigator verifies whether the predicted observable consequences actually occur. This so-called abductive method has a lot of problems. Concerned with the phase one, the observation of an anomalous fact and formulation of an explanatory hypothesis. But such formulation is inappropriate, since the first step in forensic investigation can be the verification of whether there was a relevant illegal fact to be investigated. And it has a negative consequence. A falsely assumed relevant legal fact might become an alternative fact. When faced with a surprising situation, the investigator formulates explanatory hypothesis. Well, at this phase of the inquiry, the appropriate methodological approach is suspension of judgment in order to avoid bias in the collection of real evidence. A negative aspect of this phase is that if the investigator formulates an explanatory hypothesis at this stage, material evidence that can contradict the hypothesis might not be properly considered in its possible probative force. In the second phase, the investigator starts to examine his hypothesis to derive experimental consequences. The experimental stage of the inquiry is subsequent to the collection of real evidence. Experimental analysis in the most varied areas of forensic science must be considered together to assess their mutual coherence and probative force. And it has a negative aspect. If in the analysis of material evidence, predictions can be made from experiments or models whose role is to validate or falsify hypotheses.
Mariana, you know, in this negative aspect, I would like to say that the abductive method of forensic investigation in the experience of Lava Jato operation here in Brazil allowed the identification of indeterminate facts as a crime. That's anomaly facts, not defined by the law as a crime, have become hypothetical explanations. You know.
Yes.
It's a very negative aspect.
Yes. Another name to these facts, or this type of facts, is exactly alternative facts. Okay. Well, the third phase related to the verification whether the predicted observer's consequence actually occurred. As we mentioned, the step of verifying the validity of the experimental prediction is carried out based on the result offered by all the experiments and models after the evidence was collected and analyzed. The negative aspect is, once it's verified the occurrence of a specific fact or a set of specific facts of legal relevance, the objective of a forensic civil or criminal investigation is to indicate who can be accountable for it in order to reach justice. If an explanatory hypothesis guides the investigations since the collection and selection of material evidence related to a specific fact, the results could simply validate the hypothesis without allowing the serendipitous emergence of novelties that might contradict it, in a way of a very vicious circular reasoning. So to conclude, the main objective of scientific investigation is truth, while the main objective of legal investigation is justice. Healthy models, as pointed out by O'Neill, in general can be used to reach justice by bringing about serendipitous demonstrative evidence. From an abductive point of view, scientific research begins with the observation of an anomalous fact, the postulation of an explanatory hypothesis of that fact that will be tested and then, if proven true, will be integrated into a theoretical framework. Forensic investigation, in turn, begins with the collection and analysis of real evidence, material evidence of the fact, which will later allow the elaboration of explanatory models. During the collection and analysis of real evidence, the appropriate methodological stance is suspension of judgment. In other words, the inappropriate use of abductive reason can produce a vicious circularity in which the initial premise and the conclusion are identical. Recently, the inappropriate ideological use of abductive reasoning has been an instrument of lawfare, sometimes used by forensic investigators, prosecutors, and judges in Latin America to overpass and corrupt democratic institutions. And to conclude, the abductive reasoning can be properly used by lawyers and prosecutors in the trial phase to propose explanatory hypothesis of the fact that considers all the admissible evidence, real, demonstrative, documentary, and testimonial, collected and produced. So, thank you very much. Muchas gracias. Muito obrigada to you all for your attention.